after I say go, we can go also live on YouTube. Okay.
And it will be you, Robert, doing the honors. Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, go.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to see you all. I think we miss each other very much now due to this pandemic restrictions. And let's have it started. Since we miss each other, we have lots of things to discuss today. So every year, International Women's Day, which will come in 6 days, is a chance for all of us to reflect on our past, evaluate where we are now, and understand how we can better and how better we can move forward in the future. But after a year of the global pandemic, which we all probably have experienced, which turned our lives upside down, disproportionately affecting mainly women and girls, minorities, and vulnerable groups, we are facing unprecedented challenges. This is why I'm happy to announce that together with my partners and friends and allies, Claudia de Castro Calderina, who is present with us, leadership professor and CEO of Redscope Consulting, and Marilyn Neven, program manager and international IDEA, we thought it was a perfect moment for the second senior expert dialogue called Upgrading Democracy in Europe, Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion as a Core Drivers. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to welcome very much our speakers, participants and viewers on our all social media channels. It's good to see you. Please allow me to acknowledge our very special guest, and if I may call her our friend, EU Commissioner for Equality, Helena Dalli. Commissioner Helena, it's our honor to have you with us. As you all know, Madam Commissioner have extensive experience as equality champion, which dates back to her work as Ministry for Equality in Malta. Today, Commissioner Dalli is responsible for strengthening Europe's commitment to inclusion and equality in all of its senses, irrespective of sex, racial, or ethnic origin, religion or belief, disability, age, or sexual orientation. Dear Helena, we appreciate you being with us today and the opportunity to have first-hand insights about those important issues. As you can see, we have managed to gather an impressive cross-sectional group of senior experts in Brussels, including representatives of the EU institutions, United Nations, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector. I see many familiar faces, and I'm convinced that this will have a very constructive discussion. I want to remind you that our first meeting was held in December 2019, more than a year ago, and it was a great opportunity to access the measures that should be implemented to ensure equal representation at all levels of decision making. We came up with a set of strong recommendations which we shared with the key EU decision makers. But right now, we are all living in a completely different reality, which requires new, tailor-made solutions. This is why we need to be very well prepared for that. As a chair of the vice chair of the Committee of Women's Rights and Gender Equality, I'm here and we are mainly to listen about your experience, to seek your advice and to hear your complaints in order to find synergies and see how they can contribute to more equal, inclusive, and diverse Europe. I am also here to mention some organizational and technical issues. You should all have received the agenda and the focus questions of the event. We want to be as constructive and as practical as we can. We will start with a round of speeches, starting from our honorable guest. And in the second part, we will move to an interactive exchange to look into the ways of boosting a gender balanced and inclusive recovery agenda in Europe. This will take place with a special participation of my colleague, the member of the European Parliament, a very experienced colleague, Asita Kanko from the ECR Group. Welcome, Asita, and Dirk van Gerwen, Managing Partner, and Nauta Duithiel. Following the event, we will provide you the summary of the takeouts, which can also share the relevant decision makers in Brussels. Also, please ensure that your mics, all the mics are off at all times, but we encourage you to keep your videos on. If you want to share an issue with us, you can also use the chat bot or raise the hand option. This event is being recorded, so please not only look well, but also remember that this is also streamed simultaneously on social media channels from all of the organizers. When posting something on social media, please use the hashtag SheLeadsEU. This is our official hashtag, and we encourage you to use it. And Claudia probably will underline this need often during today's meeting. The second part of the meeting will have the interactive discussion and will be accessible only to the participants invited. Also, without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Commissioner Dalli. Dear Helena, dear Commissioner, the floor is yours, and we are very much honored with your presence. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your kind words, Robert, and the honor is really mine, and I miss you too. And thank you for this invitation. So when the COVID-19 pandemic hit us last year, the first consequences for women soon became evident. Its confinement rules brought existing inequalities more to the surface. Violence against women and domestic violence increased sharply during lockdown. Other consequences then began to emerge. When childcare facilities and schools closed, women shouldered an even larger share of unpaid care work. These work-life conflicts left women with children and others within their care with bigger challenges. A Eurofound survey shows that nearly 1 in 3 women who have small children said that they found it hard to concentrate on their job because of their family duties, and 1/4 of women with small children said that family life prevented them from giving the necessary time to their jobs. So women are also feeling the financial strain more as they are overrepresented in the sectors affected most by the COVID-19 fallout. For instance, in the hospitality sector, where 61% of the workforce are women, employment fell by 23% between the second quarter of 2019 and the second quarter of 2020. So in addition, the decrease in total hours women worked was greater, and women were more likely than men to become inactive. These are just some examples of the ways that the COVID-19 crisis risks amplifying long-standing gender inequalities and reversing the gains which we have made in gender equality over the recent years. It is encouraging to see member states implement good practices during the pandemic to lift the burden on women. Many have introduced special COVID-19 parental leave and bonuses to allow workers to reconcile better work with care duties. This is crucial to prevent workers with care duties giving up their job. It is particularly important during the lockdowns and with the closure of schools and daycare centers. So some countries have made special parental leave available on a part-time basis to encourage mothers and fathers to share the leave. Also, more workplaces than before have introduced flexible working arrangements. I trust that member states will learn from this experience and swiftly transpose the work-life balance directive. I believe that new work environments can emerge, allowing for more teleworking and ensuring both women and men equally use these opportunities. Combining this with access to affordable and high-quality care services would improve work-life balance, leading to a better share of care duties between women and men. But the concern remains for me that we are not moving fast enough to achieve gender equality. This week marks the first year of the implementation of the Gender Equality Strategy 2020-2025. The strategy is our framework to promote gender equality, equal opportunities, and an inclusive recovery. Our vision is one of a Europe where all women and men, girls and boys, in all their diversity, can thrive, lead, and be free. We will in the coming days deliver on one of the key initiatives of the strategy, measures on pay transparency. The proposal aims to shed light on the reasons behind the persistent gender pay discrimination. The strategy also highlights actions on gender balance on company boards, work-life balance, and violence against women. Take gender balance on company boards, for instance, progress regarding female representation remains very slow and uneven across the EU, be it in politics or business. When dealing with the pandemic, COVID-19 task forces and expert groups often consist mainly of men. The women's voices must be heard and reflected when designing and implementing the recovery measures. Inclusion and diversity are enablers of recovery and resilience. That is why I stand firmly behind the 2012 proposal for a directive on gender balance on corporate boards and will work with the current and upcoming council presidencies to unblock it. As for rebuilding from the COVID-19 downturn, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which entered into force last February, provides funding for a gender-responsive recovery. Member states must explain how their national recovery plan could contribute to gender equality and equal opportunities for all, and the mainstreaming of those objectives. We will carefully examine how they implement the gender-sensitive response, as this is a good opportunity to step up the fight for gender equality. Together, we must not waste it and keep pushing for progress. I thank you for this opportunity to share with you these ideas and to tell you what essentially we are doing currently. And of course, I look forward to this week's presentation of the directive on proposal for a directive on pay transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you. Bravo. Yes, you see the applause. Isn't she inspirational? Isn't she great? Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you for being with us. We look forward for the discussions, and thank you for also underlining the role of men in this battle and in this context. So since we try to be gender balanced, without further ado, this meeting will be led now by Claudia, our co-organizer, a professor, leadership professor and CEO of RedScope Consulting, ally of us, and as I mentioned, co-organizer, and you will see how inspirational she is. Claudia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. And again, thank you so much, Commissioner, for all the amazing work you have been doing so far, and for all the amazing work that I'm sure you will continue doing, because you have one of the most difficult agendas in the All European Commission. So thank you for being with us and for inspiring us. And as Robert was saying, we do, before we open up for our panel debate and hear from the very senior participants that we have here with us, so I will not mention one or two because that would be difficult, but if you want to start introducing yourself in the chat box, you're most welcome. I see a lot of familiar faces, so we might know each other in most cases, but feel free to start introducing yourselves and your organizations in the chat box. Before we go to that, I will have a brief introductory on setting the scene, and my colleague Marilyn, so that there's some additional food for thought, and then we will open up for the panel conversation. We do have an hashtag that is also the password for the Slido that we will be using, because we will be asking you for input, because this is a dialogue, and we count on having your recommendations on the priorities and the good practices on gender equality and on moving forward diversity and inclusion in general, including for minorities. We will have a document from our discussion today that we will share with our fantastic commissioner and with the different EU leadership as well. So without further ado, let me open a little slide here. So voila, that was me. So we know the motto of the European Union, united in diversity. Of course, we have not yet been up to that motto because there are many groups, 51% of our population who are women, and many other groups who have not been fully on board in taking all the opportunities and all the rights that they would deserve to have, as our commissioner just brilliantly expanded. And with the crisis, we know that things will get more difficult, because after the pandemics, there will be a recession. All the research is saying the same. The figures are quite difficult. The International Labour Organization has recently mentioned that the pandemics is provoking a job loss around the world of nearly 25 million jobs. And this would bring more than 35 million of people into poverty, to add to all those that were already living under poverty. And not surprisingly, women are a big proportion of those that would lose their jobs for all the reasons that our commissioner just mentioned, because they are in the service, they are in unpaid care, jobs, etc., etc. We know the cost of exclusion, and I chose this picture to remind us of another democracy that we considered for many years to be very solid, and to see how exclusion over time, exclusive leaders who don't include the different sectors, the different groups in their societies, this kind of realities will lead to conflict. They always lead. History has shown us that when a situation like this, when we don't involve all the people, sooner or later, there's going to be social unrest. The employment is going to make it even higher. And of course, that will have a cost for our democracy, for human rights, for women's rights, and for the quality of living of all of us. So the European Union, its member states, and of course, worldwide, we cannot not put gender equality and inclusion of the different segments of our society at the center, not only of the emergency plans that we are currently putting forward, but of the recovery plans. The cost of exclusion is too high, and we can see those trends already emerging in the European Union. And of course, this risks getting higher as the impact of the continue. Just to have just a common language, when we're talking about diversity, we're talking of the multiple segments that define us as individuals. We have, as I was saying, 51% of the EU population who are women. And of course, when we are talking in our conversation about minority groups, we're talking of different age groups. Elders are more vulnerable. Young people are more vulnerable for different reasons. Some nationalities will be more privileged. Some others will have more difficulties accessing jobs, etc., etc. The same for race, ethnicity, disability, ability, some religious groups, and of course, sexual orientation. Just to give you a little overview of the numbers that we're talking about, we have 228 million women in the European Union. And we have 70 million people with disability. We have 44.7% million of people of color, and that's a low estimation from the European Anti-Racist Network, etc. So these are the people that are in the forefront of paying the cost of these pandemics, those groups that were already vulnerable before. So as the Commissioner was mentioning, COVID-19, this pandemic has exposed not only all our vulnerabilities as human beings, as organizations, as societies, but it has also exacerbated the structural inequalities that we already had. And this conversation today is precisely tackling on how can we do our best to stop this and what recommendations can we give to our decision makers, both at the European Union's level and the national member states level, to start to reduce that impact, because we see that the very, very difficult gains, slow gains that we had over the last decades are at risk of being lost. Oh, I'm an optimist. Those of you who know me know I'm an optimist. So we know that every crisis can be a window of opportunity. We have had others in history. And we also know something very important. We know that diversity is a direct driver for innovation, for performance, for good decision-making, for resilience. All this is core, is crucial today for our recovery. So we know that the organizations, the companies that are more diverse, they will have more capacity to rebound and to overcome the impact of the crisis faster. For instance, just to give you an idea of the figures, and many of you know this very well, organizations and companies where gender balance exists are more performant. They are more innovative and more resilient. And in general, McKinsey calculates that if we would add the workforce of women to our economy, we would have more $28 trillion of global growth. Stanford University shows that companies who have ethnic diversity grow their business by 24%. So our companies and our organizations, those who are now struggling with the most basic and pressing urgencies, they need to have this middle and long-term vision, because that's where their existence will be put at stake. So today's dialogue is precisely on this. As I was mentioning, personally, and us at RedScope, we work with inclusive leadership, as I was mentioning before. And in this specific agenda, we think 3 or 4 key things. We need all the recovery plans, all the funding, all the plans at the European, at the regional, at the national and at the local level to have women and people from different groups in the society to be sitting at the table where these decisions are taking, where this money is allocated, so that we know that these funds, these support mechanisms are targeting these people who are more vulnerable and that need to be protected, and that their talents can be used precisely as a backbone to the recovery that we so much need. We want, of course, to tackle things like unpaid care work, the pay gap, the social pension plans that are, of course, very discriminatory, which leaves a lot of women and minority groups in precarity. So all this is at the table today. It is my pleasure to have all of you here to discuss how do we move forward and what good practices, what has worked so far during these pandemics to protect women and minorities. Just before we get into our conversation with the panelists and all of you, my colleague, Marilyn Nevin, who's the program officer at International Ideas European office, she's going to share a little map with further data just to complete this presentation. Marilyn, thank you for this collaboration again.
Thank you very much. And Gosia, you can wait with putting up the slides. Very much, Claudia, great. That was a good setting of the scene. International ID is honored to partner with you and Robert Guédran in this event. And we are an intergovernmental organization and both a think and a do tank for global democracy support. We focus on knowledge development and in-country assistance activities. And I think that combination is very interesting for topics like these. Many of the participants do exactly the same. I would like to use my 5 minutes to provide indeed a very short overview of recommendations and resources in relation to inclusive COVID-19 recovery and how to the building back better can take form to launch the conversation that we will have later with everybody. I will provide a kind of anthology of actions for inclusive recovery drawn from International IDEA, but also other partners' comparative study and experiences. We are, of course, aware that you are not the ones who need to be convinced, but we are sure that more equality can be achieved when we join forces. And so you will all have your battles to run internally and externally, so the arguments, the methods, and the resources of others may help to boost your own. So I look forward to the exchange and also encourage all of the participants to post your links to resources in the platform's message pane. In terms of resources, it's good to mention because there's a couple of pandemic information hubs like the one created by I Know Politics, which is very interesting. And also IG's website is just a real treasure on information and toolkits linked to the discussion topic. But I'm sure that Caroline Schiele will tell us more on that later. So before I start, Gosia, please, I will just show quickly 4 maps taken from International IDEA's EU-funded global monitor on COVID-19's impact on human rights and democracy. This global monitor tracks actually many relevant indicators, but these maps that I will show just single out the gender equality and the social group equality developments. So the measures taken by governments, and when they are alarming or developments to watch, you will see them in the form there of the loops and the warning signs. So you see a global one here. The next one is for gender equality, one zoomed in on Europe. Gosia, you can pass. The next one, the third one, is the global one on social group equality. And the last one is the social group equality zoomed in on Europe. So as you see, there is work to do, and other data from International IDEA also show that it will take 48 years, for instance, to have equal numbers of men and women represented in parliaments. So we have so many reasons to act now. So thank you, Gosia. You can stop the sharing. All of the developments that are warning, many relate to violence against women or minority groups or their economic development. Some also relate to the political sphere. And so, as you have seen, also within Europe, gender equality and inclusion are under pressure sometimes. So what we need is transformative agendas to counter the deepening and the explosion of the pre-existing inequalities in society in the form of response, recovery, and reform. So now, in terms of concrete recommendations, I will focus on gender, albeit from an intersectional perspective. International IDEA is exploring initiatives and recommendations around the 3 focus areas that I already mentioned that are relevant in the pandemic, which is political representation of women, women's economic and productive lives, and violence against women. What we see is that gender equality is a prerequisite indeed for sustainable development. It is a real enabler of achieving the 2030 agenda. And the need for more data is something that we come across all of the studies and all of the conclusions and recommendations that you can find with partners and across all sectors. Considering my limited time, I will only zoom in on the political representation of women as participants from business and public sectors. Will of course share other recommendations later. As data show, closing the gaps in political representation will result in more inclusive policies, better service delivery, and ultimately a higher levels of human development. So International ID itself is also running many projects across regions to help countries to improve women's political participation and protection despite the pandemic. In Paraguay, it's definitely a key priority. We have webinar series on women in the pandemic and gender-based violence in politics, but we also assist authorities with creating gender parity law in the country and help women candidates in the upcoming local elections with trainings and school for women leaders. Also good to mention is that we will there co-launch an observatory for gender-based violence in politics, and that may be of particular interest to participants. We also foster participation in 8 African countries through a regional program. This is very effective, focusing on political dialogue, situational analysis, trainings, and mentorships. And in Nepal, I just wanted to mention that one as well. It is remarkable because there we work with local governance and women in the country. So more details I can always provide. So the lack of inclusion of women in the pandemic and post-pandemic decision-making is a key priority for many actors and for many people. We should make use of existing gender equality mechanisms in this pandemic response, but it is not enough. The need for quick action cannot be an excuse for closed-door governance, but instead countries should take measures to ensure diversity. On elections, recommendations go from making adaptations to electoral operations to the pandemic, make them gender sensitive, and very concrete recommendations like eliminating candidate fees for women, increasing their access to free media time, and ensuring electoral facilities that fit women and advance their participation. Voter education initiatives should at all times, of course, ensure to reach women and minority groups, as sometimes they are left out. Women's access to political finance, that's another topic that I wanted to raise here because it's among the high priority topics for International IDEA, as it seems to be a recurrent obstacle, including in face of the pandemic. It was found that 71% of female politicians consider a lack of financial resources as one of their key obstacles to move up in politics. So we see that the political sphere, when it's dominated by money, it is almost certainly a political sphere dominated by men. So one recommendation in this area is to rethink political finance regulations from a gender perspective. For example, in France and Portugal, the introduction of gender-targeted public funding seems to have increased remarkably the number of women elected in parliament, so it can have effect. Other recommendations are to consider tax reductions for childcare and household expenses during election campaigns, providing training on fundraising and cost-efficient campaigning, and also running media campaigns to foster women's political participation. Projects to strengthen the role of women in political parties are also efficient, as well to mentor potential female leaders. I know that a lot of organizations are focusing on that. Lastly, as regards women in parliaments, Jonathan Murphy is participating and give us more insights later, but we see some remarkable initiatives to accommodate the needs of women legislators, but also staff of parliaments during the pandemic and install gender-sensitive parliamentary practice. Among those are, for instance, respecting working hours, even under virtual conditions, paid sick leave and care leave, and support on ICTs, but also on countering harassment. I end by quoting a minister of South Africa who recently said in one of our events, visibility is not only about being seen, it is also about being heard. So hearing stories of and about women who dare to enter the political spaces, generate knowledge and becomes of value to the society. And they help us as such deepen democracy and foster altogether the practices that improve women's participation in politics. So if this group can provide a platform for sharing those good stories, it is, I think, a very good start. So I will leave it there, Claudia. Thank you very much, and back over to you.
Thank you, Marilyn, for the exhaustive list of different important elements for our conversation. Just before we pass to additional votes, a little recap. Some of you have already started answering to an initial question in Slido. Could I ask you to raise your hand just to make sure that you are all okay with Slido on your phones? The hashtag SheLeadsEU that was shared on the chat. Great, thank you. So as you can see, there is now an open question and 5 people already replied. What good practices or lessons learned could you share to protect, support women and minorities in Europe? And I can see that there's already several ones, including let me just see, targeted funding for women. The leadership needs to support internal diversity and inclusion programs, mainstream gender and other diversity experts for real, capitals in all policies and recovery funds. The tools exist, gender budgeting, mainstreaming, minimum income, 32 hours a week, and an example of Kellogg's. In the meantime, Catherine from ILGA Europe also shared the COVID impact assessment report in the chat. So I invite you all to continue following the chat and to go to Slido right now before I will give the floor to Asita and Dirk. And to all of you, I would kindly ask you to take a few minutes. I've shared the questions, not only the open one, but the other polls that we will have. So the first one is your perception on the necessary policies and support mechanisms, including funding, are they being put in place to protect women currently and for the post-pandemic recovery? And we're asking you to vote. The same, but focusing on protection of minority groups. And again, we're talking of race, ethnicity, LGBTIQ+, age groups, disability, etc., etc. Then it's a specific question on your organizations. Is your organization taking specific measures to protect women and minority employees? And then it's one of a larger nature. Is your organization taking specific measures to protect women and minorities in any other manner, externally in society, etc.? Because many of you have that kind of social impact. Any doubts, please use the chat. Is everybody okay with the polls? Good. I see the non-verbal. That's important. Alia is supporting Alia Yakupova. She's from our team at Redscope. She's the one handling Slido. Alia, we give 3 minutes for that open question, and then we open the live polls. Okay?
Okay.
Great. So you have 5 minutes to go through the Slido and open your mic or go to the chat if anything is unclear. Okay? I can see a few people having difficulties with the application. Of course, you can also use the website slido.com, as Alia just mentioned in the chat. Voilà, and I see we have already 14 replies. The code, Dirk, is hashtag #SheLeadsEU. Okay?
She leads.
#SheLeadsEU. Please, if you can see in the chat, I will send it again. Okay?
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Here. Because this will help us putting your thoughts and your proposals into a document. 17 people. Okay. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you already did it? So I'm... Okay. Raise your hand if you still need a few minutes, 1 minute. Okay. 1 minute for Dirk, and then Alia, I will take a look. You can all see the replies of others. I will start just mentioning a few. Give them comfort. Yeah, it's about sense of belonging, about caring. Maybe I will invite those of you who are reading this, that when you take the floor, eventually you elaborate. Commitment from leadership is crucial. Yes, no lip service, but real actions. Practice what you preach. Indeed. Intersectional assessment and approach to policies, giving ample work flexibility. Small children for families and small children. Helping both parents take care of the kids, indeed, especially when schools are closed. Questionnaire to first understand what the major problems are women, minority groups encounter. Data, we need data, definitely. Prioritize actions and build an action plan. Ensure policies are in place. Evaluate regularly. Ensure diversity in decision groups and financial cost of unpaid work for women was greater. Yes, flexibility, financial support, gender-targeted public funding for women candidates, equal sharing of burden of care, flexible working hours, gender budgeting again, comparable and sufficient data, indeed, plus all the others that I have mentioned. Okay, I propose now, Alia, since we have focus on results, not the present's trust, that's the last one I have, and I will let Dirk explain that one when I give him the floor. Can we rapidly get to the other polls now that you got used to the application? Voila. Do you agree that the policies and support mechanisms are there to protect women during and post COVID pandemic? You have the possibility to rate it. Fifteen people voted. 18. Okay. Does someone need 1 minute more in this question? No? Okay, we have 20. And we have 35%, as you can see, voting for 3. So something is being done, but clearly not as much as it would be ideal. We have 0%. No one thinks that we are in an ideal situation, of course. We have still 26 plus 17% that really are on the no, things are not being done. And we have some more optimistic with 4 and 5, as you can see. Someone is sharing the screen on an email, please. Yes, thank you. Alia, can we move, wait a second, can we, yes, move to the following one. This one is focusing not, it's the same question, but focusing on minorities. Okay. Okay, 21%, 21 participants already, 22 already voted, and 41% think that no, basically it's largely insufficient. No, yes, the majority of the people are, as you can see, between 1 and 2. You can all see it, right? Is there anyone at this stage that is not following Slido on your mobiles or on your internet? We don't want to be excluding anyone from this exercise. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Alia, can you launch the following one? Is your organization taking specific measures to protect women and minority employees? There's a typo there. Apologies. It's varying, okay. It's nearly 50-50. Okay, 22. Okay, 22 participants replied. 59% have measures in place. So we are looking forward to hear your good practices in the chat box or when you take the floor. 41% don't, which is still an interesting result. Alia, I think it's the final question, the final poll, please. Is your organization taking specific measures to protect women and people from minority groups in any other manner? i.e., do you have programs that support, fund, etc.? Not so much your employees, but women in society in whatever groups you act. Okay, 22 participants voted and 68% have measures to protect people, people from minority groups and women in other manners. So we're looking forward to hearing that, all that. Thank you for that. We will keep these results in mind. And without further delays, I'm opening the panel. So we will have Asita Kanko and Dirk van Herven, and then I will open the floor. I will invite Caroline Schill, and then anyone else who wants to join with the topic of what are the priorities? How do we move forward now that we know how the situation is? So Asita Kanko, she is a member of the European Parliament. She is a member of the Conservatives and Reformists group. She's also an author and a women's rights activist. Asita, thank you for being with us. What are the top priorities for socioeconomic and political protection of women and minorities, in your opinion?
Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you, Marilyn, for this opportunity to discuss this important issue. And also we have had the opportunity to hear all your comments and also the intervention of the Commissioner that have been working very well with in this inside the European institutions. So I believe, like all of you do, that it's quite essential that we discuss this topic, but that we also do something about it. And it's clear to all of us what kind of challenges that we are facing now. And a lot of data is showing that the pandemic is exacerbating inequality for women and girls. During the crisis, women have played an outsized role at the front line of healthcare, childcare, social work, shop work, and community work. The question is not just how we can address the inequalities and pressures placed on women during the pandemic, but how we can build back better, more generally for the future, and learn from any mistake that was made. COVID showed us also that women's rights and opportunities still hang by a precarious thread, even inside the EU. Crisis has a tendency to highlight where the deepest inequalities and weaknesses lie in our society. Systems and laws that we once thought were stable and protected bend and break under the pressure of changing circumstances. And we learn this over and over again in wars, in famines, in revolutions, in recessions. Simone de Beauvoir warned us also in the second sex. However, with every crisis also comes opportunity, and we have to grasp it, and we have to fight for it. There are three clear areas where we need to concentrate our efforts within the European Union, in my opinion. First, improving the safety of women concretely. Second, strengthening the economic security of women, and ending underlying social bias. The increase in domestic violence during the lockdown has been heartbreaking and alarming. Organizations and government took actions to tackle this issue and provide much needed refuge for women during that period. But lockdown has also highlighted the deeper systematic flaws in protecting women. MEPS recently voted in favor of recommendations that highlighted the need for safe and flexible emergency warning systems, the need to offer new services to assist women in contacting the police directly by phone, email, and text message, and the need for more funding and exchange of best practices to better protect women. Lockdown also showed that staying at home was not always the safest option for some women. Indeed, for many, it required spending every hour of every day with your tormentor. We must find alternative and innovative solutions for providing support for women in these terrible situations. We must also look to address women's specific healthcare needs during a pandemic. We also cannot ignore the huge impact of COVID on women's reproductive rights and access to fertility services inside the EU. We need to look at how these services can be provided in a safe and compassionate way. When it comes to the economic challenges, it's clear that the fight for equal pay and equal opportunities for women in the workplace could well backslide unless we take clear and decisive action during the period of economic recovery. Women in the EU already earn on average 14% less per hour than men. There must be a concerted effort to end unequal pay once and for all through more transparency and, if necessary, through more legislation. It is simply unacceptable in 2021 that women can do the same job with the same amount of experience and not be paid the same amount as their male colleagues. To help combat this, we need better sharing of paternity and maternity leave between parents, and we also need to network and improve the capacity of women to negotiate. I have been doing that also in activities that I've been conducting. And we need to do away with the existing belief that a career break to have a child means a career end for women. And perhaps the new way of working is going to change that perspective. It's key to achieving this in childcare to improve equality between women and men. COVID has highlighted that working from home is not a substitute for childcare, and that reliable and affordable access to childcare is essential. Numerous studies of working parents' lives during COVID-19 have shown also that a disproportionate share of the burden is still falling on women. In addition to taking care of the children, many women found themselves taking care of men during this period and having more to clean at home, more to cook, etc. So we need to look at more creative, consistent, and reliable childcare services and more inspiring sources. Services that reflect the modern world of work, that parents work flexible and unusual hours, that there are single parents, and that the cost of childcare is still a significant portion of a person's earnings. Research also shows that in the US and Europe, working women are currently spending an average of 15 hours a week more on unpaid domestic labor than men. And meanwhile, many women have lost their jobs during this crisis due to being overrepresented in insecure and part-time work sectors such as hospitality, leisure, retail, and tourism. We need to examine how we can better protect women in these sectors and those that have 0-hour contracts and flexible contracts. We also need to look at how we can get these women back into work. That is why education will be very important, not only education for individuals, but also for organizations. It's essential that women have support to retain and gain new skills so that they can enter a different career or become entrepreneurs. For this to happen, we also need to improve access to loans, equity finance, and microfinancing through EU programs and funds. Research shows that companies with strong female representation are 25% more likely to have above average profitability. Diversity also protected companies from a bigger crisis, research showed. The bottom line is that empowering women will enable a stronger economic recovery. It's, however, not all doom and gloom. Many men have shared in household work during the crisis in a way that couldn't have been imagined only 30 years ago. And one point I believe strongly in is the duty of all of us as parents to nurture a generation of girls and boys who understand that families are partnerships, that unpaid household work within the family is a role for both men and women, that effective partnerships are based on respect and equality. We all have a duty to pass on those values to the next generation, and they learn by watching us. As a mother, I see my daughter watching me too. So what are we sharing with them? This is what is going to shape the future. COVID has also highlighted that behind job descriptions, there are people, real people with children, parents, responsibilities, and a home life. Crucially, we also need more data. Data in the proof is the proof we need to show that gender equality in many respects has progressed, but is nowhere near achieved. There are some people still denying the existence of problems. Data shows the impact on those women still living in fear, in poverty, and injustice. And the fact that we are having this conversation today show that we are willing to fight and that we recognize the dangers that lie ahead. I wish more of us could recognize these dangers. We often talk about women's ability to have it all. At the moment, yes, women have it all, being a colleague, a partner, a mother, a teacher, a cook, a cleaner, a nurse. It's not what women had in mind. Equality and fairness will be the building blocks of our economic and social recovery. And we must do all we can to nurture it. And I will always help for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Asita. Indeed, we need to have it all, but in a different manner. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I know you need to leave very soon. Since we're already running a little bit late, I would like to immediately give the floor to Dirk van Herven. Dirk, as I said, is managing partner at Nauta Dutil, a law firm. He's also an author, and he has been extensively engaged in women's rights and inclusion activities. Dirk, what are the priorities from the perspective of the public sector so that we ensure the current pandemic doesn't move us backwards in terms of decades, in terms of rights and opportunities and place in the job market?
Thank you, Claudia. You mean the private sector, I guess. Private sector. Indeed,
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me as one of the few men in this call, and thank you. I think it's important that men support the causes of women and that we are allies. I'm myself been selected as an outstanding ally by British Chambers, and I really believe that we need to change the world, and it will be for the better. We'll get better results when we're more diverse and we all work together. I think what's important and what I realized throughout the years I've been looking at the issue is that diversity, improving diversity, is also about changing culture. We all have unconscious bias. I'm not saying something new. You all know that. There is unconscious bias in all of us, and it determines about 90 to 95% of our decisions. Men do not see the issue. They really think that everybody's equal and is treated equally. And then it's important to speak about it. The words are important. And Claudia, you spoke about the Capitol, which has been attacked by people. And what is the reason for that? The reason is very simple. If you have a president who speaks about hate for 4 years, then words will stick. And that's not the only president. Other cases also, people have spoken for years about hate, and it changes society. And then we had the beautiful poet Amanda Gorman, who spoke at Biden's inauguration, and those words also stuck. Those are words of love, those are words of equal treatment, and those also change minds. And therefore, speaking about it is one of the best practices you can have. Address the issue, make the issue an issue which is on the table all the time in your organization. And I would like to share with you a very few practices because we have little time and there's a lot of time for discussion. That's very important afterwards. But one of the things which are very important is that the managing partner, the CEO, that he or she really speaks about diversity, supported by management, and puts it on the table. It should be on the agenda. When the CEO steps into the room, or when a manager steps into the room, everybody should know that diversity is on the table. When I organize becoming managing partner meetings, we put diversity on the agenda, not at the end of the agenda. It is always in the middle of the agenda. And where in the beginning, we only spent 10 minutes. I mean, lawyers, partners are in most cases men and very conservative. In the beginning, it took 5 minutes. Today, of the 2 hours meetings, it takes half an hour of discussion. Because also that during those years, that all those measures change the firm and make it much better. It makes it a much more comfortable place. And I'm not only speaking about gender diversity, it's any kind of diversity. In other words, it should be on the table. Show also that diversity gives better results, that you will have better people, that you will have people from all backgrounds, much more women than if you wouldn't have diversity on the agenda, and you will have also the best brains among the women, and you will change. You will see it will help and improve the results. Another thing which is very important is that as an organization, you bring it to the public. You explain to the public that you're really investing in diversity. We ourselves have been working very hard in 2 years, and now the TIL has obtained the Actiris label of diversity. I think we are the only law firm who got that after 2 years, and we continue to work on it to improve the different diversity measures we are putting in place. And again, it's not only gender diversity, it's all kinds of diversity, but specifically also gender diversity. And it's important also to bring it to the outside. I mean, when we go to the universities to look for students, then we speak about it. It's on the top of our list, and we see that young people react to that. They appreciate it, both men and women. Also, when you speak about promotion within the firm, you always put it on the table. Also, it's important to make sure that diversity is always on front of HR policy and of the way that you want to make sure that everybody has equal chances within the firm. And then finally, a very important issue I've been struggling with over the years is indeed what has been mentioned also earlier during this call, is the fact that women in most cases still have the responsibility for the family and the households. people say, and it's true, women have 2 jobs. They work during the day and they work at night, where men basically only work during the day. And I think I've been thinking about how do you deal with this in a society where you do not intervene in private life. I think companies should intervene in private life. Companies should come with proposals to change that, to explain to men and women that you have a much better relation if you permit both of them to develop their careers and to invest professionally. And whatever the career is, whatever the profession is they look into, give them the chance. And I've been thinking about, and I've been looking for people to give informations about it, to educate people, and also, of course, send both women and men to those kind of courses or seminars, in order to, especially the men, in order to be able to manage their time much better, because they will really need to get more to be learned about and thought about how they manage their time. So a few measures I wanted to share with you. It's very practical, but I noticed one thing is, where 10 years ago, this was for the first time put on the table in my firm in a more organized way. Of course, always on the table, but it was on the table in a more organized way. I saw that most men were not interested. Today, a lot of the older men, white lawyers are our partners, start also making proposals about what do we need to change. And they also started to understand that we need to change and to improve diversity. And I think that means that slowly, over 10 years, culture can change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk, for the experience and the inputs. And it is amazing to see that even the dinosaurs can, at some stage, be open to some new ideas. And we have one of the participants here who's Louise Harvey, who's actually in our book, Women Leading the Way in Brussels. And she is the one who's frequently saying, be aware of dinosaurs, don't marry the dinosaurs, talk to them, but invest on the other one. So I hope that she will as well be part of our conversation very soon. Before we get into our conversation just between the experts, so there's Chatham House rules, unless the group prefers otherwise, but we thought that it could be interesting since we're going to focus on priorities, and there might be thoughts that you wish just to reserve to our small group. We are saying goodbye from our participants in live stream, and we will continue right now with the rest